Welcome back to our conversation on the state of the economy. We'll be getting to some of your questions and comments in just a minute. Let me bring in Donald Mugeni, who's joining us live from Migori County. Donald, you're in the county space quite literally right now. And as we've seen, the protests are also in the counties. Protesters are sort of occupying governors' offices. They're set to get a, reduced allocation this year. Obviously, everybody's taking cuts across the board. So, what are the specific issues at the counties? I mean, people raise issues of corruption, spending more on remuneration or recurrent expenditure rather than development. But there's also the issue of perennial delays of disbursements to the counties. So what needs to change at the county level?
Yeah, I mean, I think counties, with the events of the last few weeks, are going to face significant challenges. I mean, you've already alluded to the delays in statutory disbursements. And I mean, it's so chronic, I think, that most governors have spoken about. The implication of that in the immediate is obviously, we'll have critical staff not being paid on time. But the most important and most unfortunate is, we are going to have significant service delivery failures. Counties will not be in a position to provide critical functions that have been exclusively allocated to them. And that's going to, in the long term, continue to diminish the trust that people have within our governance systems. So I think this moment calls for, a significant restructure of how we do our politics. We need to relook our development priorities. I think there's been wanton disregard of, guidelines, public finance guidelines by counties. Significant wastage, from what we see from the PAC reports of the Senate. So there is, everyone is tightening their belts, but we also need to significantly increase the levels of accountabilities within county governments. I think the wastage that we've seen in previous years needs to be significantly dealt with.
Interesting that we talk about that. To what extent are the reduction of allocations to the counties following, everything that's happened over the last month, to what extent will that hamper service delivery?
I think significantly. I think counties were expecting up to around 400 billion this year. I think that's going to fall down to probably around 380 billion. But what we know is those allocations actually only exist on paper. Disbursement significantly delays, and that has, as I indicated, a significant impact on the ability of counties to deliver services. I mean, it is not, strange to walk into a district level 4 hospital that doesn't have medicine, where patients are turned away and asked to go purchase, even needles or medicine, critical medicine from private entities. So we will expect that, in the long run, that counties will continue to significantly struggle. And hopefully, I mean, if there is significant prudence and stewardship from, county governments on the resources that they receive, then that might reduce that level of stress. But so far, I think, with no incentive to address issues of corruption, we've not seen significant prosecution, over the years. So unless we address those systemic issues, I think Kenyans within counties will continue to suffer, and county governments, the county administrators, will continue to feel that political pressure from citizens.
And Let's take a look now, because we're going to now get into the rounds of where we go from here and some of the solutions that have been proposed. But Terence, I'd like to begin with you with sort of what changes, improvements you'd like to see in the markets going forward, as they're as open, as transparent. Many will remember, at least individual investors, the excitement of an IPO, which we haven't seen in quite a while. And we keep being told, soon, there's one coming. Is that an indicator of where we are, and what would you like to see happen?
That's a good question. It's not all gloom. I guess there's an opportunity to always change. The secondary market, especially for debt, is very constrained. It's constrained because of a number of issues. During the day, if you'd like to look for the price of a particular bond on the secondary market, it's very difficult to find. You have to wait and possibly to the end of the day or to the end of the week to get the pricing for that security. It's important that we reform the debt markets to be able to provide for enhanced, better trading facilities on the pre-trade and the trade. That enhanced trading then flows through to the provision of pricing of those securities. And effectively then, with instruments where you can get easy pricing for, it then means it's easier to trade them. It's easier to, pass them through. For example, if you're doing an untrade transaction, for example, a borrowing transaction, if you're an institution. Effectively, with the liquidity, that means that the pass-through of pricing to the primary market, which is the primary issuance, is easier. It's easier, it's better. Government is then able to raise additional funding at a much cheaper rate than it's currently doing. So that's important. Secondly, we have to, the market structure as it is that you have the large institutional players not having direct access into the secondary markets. They have to use intermediaries. They have to, it's a bit inefficient.
Yeah.
And this includes banks, includes fund managers who hold close to 70, 80% of the domestic debt.
Yes.
We have to allow these players to trade their securities easy, to find counterparties, to just enhance liquidity around those instruments. Effectively, what that will also do would be to increase participation by even the foreign investors, especially on the debt space.
Yeah.
Currently, we have less than 10% foreign participation in the debt markets. And, of course, if you ask them...
What's the right balance? What's the right mix in your view?
Well, because of sovereignty issues, you want it to, I guess, around 20, 40%.
Yes.
And you can see in jurisdictions that are much smaller than ours, Uganda, Ghana, where foreign participation is much larger than what we have here. And if you ask those foreign investors, why are you not participating in Kenyan markets? They'll tell you the market is very opaque. A quick win for us is to ensure, how do we ensure transparency, efficient markets, a trading platform that allows those investors to be able to see the market directly, seated in London, seated in the US, wherever. They can see the markets and they can quickly participate. These same investors are investing in the Eurobond papers, right? And they participate in this external financing.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, is I think we need to incentivize institutions, and Moody said this about one of our strengths as a country, that we have a very deep financial sector. And I think we need to incentivize institutions that pool funds from citizens towards investment opportunities. So look, we are trying to do housing for the disciplined forces or for Raia. Pooled investments are able to pull that cash and do those developments better than possibly what government is doing. Right? Even in the thick of things, we're still contributing to our pension schemes. We're still contributing to our various
those
chamas.
are large pools of money.
I get relatives calling me all the time, which money market fund, which fund should I put my money in? So Kenyans are still very keen on what they can do with the little that they have.
Yeah.
And so we have to incentivize these institutions, fund managers, asset managers, who have the expertise to pull that money together and put it towards some of these investments. Even as government is talking about privatization, it's the fund managers, it's the asset managers who would be best placed to make that investment choice for the local mwananchi.
Because they're also pooling money from the individual investors, you know, as well. So transparency in that space. Raymond, so where do we go from here in your view? You'd mentioned that initially that this would be a good test case, you know, to see with a perhaps more stable, more predictable, you know, taxation act, because we'll now have Finance Bill 2023 that is currently in play, which people need to understand, by the way. It's not that we do not have a taxation law in place. So what are you looking forward to in the next 6 months before government may make an attempt to reintroduce a finance bill?
Yes, from a banking perspective, and then also just as Kenyans, the first point is we need to give credit to KRA. They've done a good job because for the just financial year that ended last month, they're able to collect 2.4 trillion, and that's a significant amount. So as government, we need
but
to...
But their target had been revised down,
we need,
so
yes,
hadn't it?
So as government, so just borrowing from private sector. Because as private sector, the way we budget is we look at last year's performance, then now we budget, and then now be moderate. So from that 2.4, it was an increase of 11.1%. So that should be the starting point as to if things are remaining constant, we'll be able to get 2.4 trillion. Then we can be able to add it by 11%. Where do we get? And we start from there. Then we reduce our appetite for debt. Because when you're talking about Moody's, and I know Yvonne, when you talk about Moody's, in fact, people are wondering what you're talking about. What you're just talking about is it's CRB for Kenya. In that Kenya now, under the one of the CRB providers worldwide, who is Moody's, is saying we are reducing the rating, the credit worthiness of Kenya from very risk to from high risk to very high risk.
Very high risk,
So that has consequences in that locally, if your rate has been reduced that way, even when you want to borrow, first the amount that you'll borrow will be limited, and then secondly, even those who will be willing to be able to lend to you also take a step back, and then also the rate at which they can lend to you goes up. So let's work within what KRA has collected, and we reduce our appetite. Reducing our appetite also works on the fact that local banks will be able to on-lend more to private sector to be able to produce more. We create more employment and actually also be able to contribute more to government revenue. Because if government doesn't reduce the appetite and come borrowing more locally, we just be able to limit the amount that banks can be able to on-lend to individuals and private sector, which is also a dangerous trend for the fact that we'll not be able to grow the economy and get out of this particular situation. Because this calls for a very local solution. And we have minds we can be able to discuss together. And part of what the Gen Z have actually been able to show the way is the fact that government ought to engage more with citizens and private sector and businesses to be able to understand the ecosystem, even as they make policies, and be able to do impact assessment around those policies. Then I look at it in that we're in a moment where the president has a golden opportunity to be able to appoint men and women of honor, character, competence, and servant leadership to be able to listen to the citizens and be able to converse with private sector and businesses as they make policies, and also be able to come back for impact assessment as to how those policies have been able to work. Lastly, it's the aspect of and I've been crying a lot on this, that we need government to preach hope to Kenyans, more specifically to the private sector, because it's the private sector and individuals who actually pay taxes. Government doesn't contribute to the payment of taxes as such. Taxes come from private sector and individuals. So even when we are in this moment, which I'm calling rebirth, we need to be able to reaffirm to private citizens that please keep on doing what you're doing. And to government, even as citizens keep on pressing even the demonstrations, government needs to be at the forefront to be able to protect property of citizens and businesses, which I've not seen it doing very well, but they need to focus on that, protect property, private property, and then encourage people to be able to produce more.
Yeah.
And then, as Terry is saying, even as we implement austerity measures, let's look at priority areas that can be able to generate more. So part of which is the creative economy. We have our youth. We can be able to put more funds there, and it will be able to generate more, create employment, and then also be able to create more revenue.
Okay. Well, we speak of a rebirth. One of, as we go through what that rebirth will look like, Kwame, is the idea that we need to have an audit of our public debt. What do you think about this idea, and what should it achieve if it is something we go ahead with? I mean, there's been, some attempts here and there, in terms of even getting the SGR contracts to be public. There was a court case. Government was ordered to do so, and then they came back and went back to the Court of Appeal and cited non-disclosure agreements that they had signed. In that, what should a public audit do, and what should it achieve, and what should it tell us?
All right. So I looked at, of course, the public audit came from the president's speech a couple of weeks back, and what the intention was based on the claim that some of the debts that are owed are not genuine, in the sense that they're not owed to real people and might be. And I think it's a reflection of the trust in government that was low, and I think now it's almost zero. So what the president was trying to do was to say, fine, we'll have a couple of people who can actually help us to regain public confidence by resolving the question that this debt is owed, and looking at that. I don't think the public audit, auditing the public debt will tell us anything new, because the Auditor General has done that, including specific Eurobonds here and there. This office does a pretty fine job. So it might give us more granular things, but I don't think it's going to tell us something that we don't know. What do we need? In my view, that question of trust is essential. But I think the big question that government has now is, first, we have to accept that the finance bill is dead. If it has, and that parliament actually has to reaffirm, if it does, it means that there needs to be some negotiation with the IMF by saying, look, our citizens aren't prepared to take the level of taxes that are required for us to meet your program goals. So let's renegotiate this program. Because I think the targets were too tight, including the revenue side. Now, if that happens and there's a conversation about that, then we need to speak to ourselves as adults. Perhaps the president and a few people as adults. I don't know that a coalition government is what gets it, but as adults say this. Look, we have these public debts. They are owed. They were spent on three things. One, some of it was stolen. Some of it was spent on things that we meant to be good infrastructure were not. So some part of it is wasted. And we bought expensive debt, so we have to pay. We are therefore seeking this kind of space. But to ensure that this is not repeated, because that's what I think would gain public trust, we are going to have an audit of public spending to see where money is wasted. And this audit will not only have local people, we can have international people, experts, to actually tell us where public money is wasted. And we can tell it from the procurement side. I mean, I work in a small office. We are not going to buy bottles of water at 300 shillings. Government buys a bottle of drinking water at 800. I'm not kidding. It's been cited. 800 shillings. Now, whoever is doing that professional contracting, he's himself a professional. and whoever is selling to him are in collusion.
Yeah.
It's clear.
Yeah.
So if we find mechanisms to discipline public spending in real ways, for instance, the public payrolls are not even known. There was a claim in one audit report once that there's a gentleman, a man, they tend to be men, working for both the county government of Murang'a and working for the county government of, county government of Laikipia. Or let me just say, two county governments in, yes, and drawing wages on both sides. So how does somebody work 80 kilometers apart?
Conference.
Of course, we had a wage bill conference. But the wage bill is just to give me the numbers.
Right.
So unless we get that level of granularity, how many people actually work for Kenya? I've had people who work in the public service themselves saying, I don't think there are a million people working in this public service. So spending and disciplining spending up there, I think, is a useful thing. Because you cannot pay 1 trillion shillings in wages and another 400 billion or so in allowances. For what? So if people earn low wages, just give them the 400 billion on top of their wages, give everybody a 40% wage increment, and let it be that. Yeah. So I think it's stuff like that that would be, so that we prevent this kind of stuff where you have state departments that have 40 cars and 60 drivers. Okay. that too has been found. So I'm not being flippant. I'm not raising this. So that kind of audit, in my view, would be useful. Why does the government, which buys the highest amount of fuel, pay a premium in fuel of sometimes as much as 20 shillings per litre beyond what the IPRA decides? So it's simple detail like that that looks like we are being very petty. Yeah. If we don't discipline the spending at the department level, we are coming back to this same moment in another 10 years. And it will be sad, because what it will show is, as a country, we are sharp talkers, we dress in fine suits, but we can't do any work that is meaningful. That's it. So to answer your question, I think if we had a public and open audit around how government spends money on its workers, both in terms of procurement of people and in terms of procurement of goods and services, and where the money goes to and how it is spent, we might reach a reasonable compact about how national government and county governments can spend on reasonable, can make that discipline reasonable. Just that. And then finally, I think that my colleagues here are very polite, but the truth is, the reason after Moody's, and it was expected. Yes. After Moody's downgraded Kenya's debt to junk status, junk status, as in junk status, obviously any person, including your pension fund and mine, are not going to lend to a government that is in junk status bonds at the same rate you are lending to them 2 weeks ago. Why? Because the political risk has risen. And why has the political risk risen? Parliament, in its wisdom, decided not to listen to citizens who went to them. They received 900 petitions telling them, this tax is too high, it's going to break the donkey's back. They did not listen, and it broke the donkey's back. So what anybody out there is reading is, in addition to the financial risks that the government of Kenya faces, they now have a political risk in the streets. You're not going to lend to them at the same amount. But then finally, on the private sector side, a bank sitting up there and Kwame goes for a loan and say, so for instance, somebody who's half my age goes for a loan and say, look, I'm Gen Z, and I have this fantastic idea, right, that I'm going to develop over the next 4 years. And they're seeing government giving them 18%. Yes. They're not going to lend to you for as long as private sector is not allowed to recover by those interest rates coming down. Investment will not take place. The tax generation will not happen. Yeah. Employment will be a problem, and this political risk problem will remain. So yes, we need to do that. They're painful, without doubt. And I'm not saying that they're easy to do. Yeah. But we cannot wish them away by having white marble pillars appearing in a nice lectern and giving a fantastic speech drafted by PR guys, some of whom used to work here. That's not going to cut it.
Kwame Wino, thank you very much. From IEA Kenya, Raymond Molenje, who's from Kenya Bankers Association, Terence Adembesa from the East African Bond Exchange, and very warm thanks as well to Donald Mogeni, who's a governance and public policy analyst. Where are we? Here we are. There we are. Let's take a break. Oh, we're not taking a break. Let's go straight to the day's business news.